30 years ago, Pearl Jam burst onto the scene with their debut album, TEN. And through the death of hair metal to the flannel of grunge, through ska punk, all the way up through low-riding hip-hop from the East and West Coast, we're counting down the 11 greatest debut albums of the 1990s. I'm AJ from Geekscape. Let's get into it. Number 11, Counting Crows, August and Everything After. No band sounded like the Counting Crows unless you went back into the 1970s. They sounded like the band, Van Morrison, and the other folky troubadours, maybe a little jingle-jangle pop of the Byrds, but they definitely didn't sound like anyone else that was coming out in the 1990s. And maybe that's why I had a personal aversion to them at the time, but looking back, that album's timeless. Adam Duritz name-dropped people like Bob Dylan and other influences throughout the album, but it was really his voice that stood out. It was so whiny. It was so different than anything else that was going on at the time. Songs like Anna Begins and Round Here were very mellow. The album also includes poppier songs like Rain King and the album closer, A Murder of One. But maybe the thing that in hindsight hurt the album's standing was the fact that the song For an Eggman, Einstein on the Beach, was not included and it was left onto the DGC Rarities compilation. Maybe if it was on there, it would have been a little higher than 11. Number 10. Jeff Buckley, Grace. Having large shoes to fill, with his father being 60s troubadour Tim Buckley, Jeff spent much of his life playing music, singing in coffee shops, and even released an EP of him performing live at Santini before he released his major label debut, Grace. But by the time that came out, he had such a vocal range that he was blowing everyone away. Again, an example of someone who didn't fit in the times, but transcended them with hindsight. Jeff Buckley's vocal performances, from everything just mellow and calm to just almost sounding like a cat trapped in a corner about to attack. He really ran the gamut of what you could do vocally, and it showed on the album Grace. Unfortunately, Jeff Buckley left us too soon as he was working on his follow-up, an album tentatively titled My Sweetheart the Drunk. He went for a swim and got caught in the wake of a boat motor. The album Grace has such standout tracks as Last Goodbye, So Real, Lover You Should Have Come Over, and even a Leonard Cohen cover of Hallelujah that puts the original to shame. Number 9, Massive Attack, Blue Lines. While mostly unknown in the US, this album got up to number 13 in the UK charts and defined trip-hop for years to come. While everyone else was going hard, Massive Attack was going mellow, but still aggressive. Massive Attack grew out of the Wild Bunch, which was an 80s sound system collective in Bristol in the UK that also featured a pre-Soul to Soul producing Nelly Hooper. So in that sense, the first Massive Attack album stands as a tribute to the funk, the reggae, and the early hip-hop that made them popular DJs. They combined it all and created trip-hop. No singular trip-hop record remains as influential as this Massive Attack debut. Standout tracks include the amazing and still unsurpassed Unfinished Symphony, Daydreaming, and the album opener, Safe from Harm. Number 8, Alanis Morissette, Jagged Little Pill. Boasting star musicians like Flea, Dave Navarro, and Taylor Hawkins, later drummer for the Foo Fighters, Alanis Morissette's debut album was angst and pop and a little bit of irony. Not really. Bursting onto the scene with her debut single, You Ought to Know, every girl who had ever been turned down by an ungrateful guy got their revenge. It was almost like a collective sigh from femininity came up at one point in the 90s and just yelled, "Hey, you, Jack." Off the strength of her 5 singles, You Ought to Know, Hand in My Pocket, You Learn, Head Over Feet, and Ironic, the album sold over 19 million copies and has even been turned into a musical. The album was unavoidable in the 1990s. Everyone knew it, everyone had it. Even the songs that weren't released as singles were hits. They even made a point to talk about this album for almost an entire movie called The Trip to Italy. Now, technically, before you get in the comments section talking about how Alanis Morissette had her Canadian mall pop albums, just know those were pretty much wiped from the planet at the point. So for most of the world, unless you were maybe in Canada at the time, Alanis Morissette's debut is Jagged Little Pill. Number 7, Daft Punk, Homework. No album has been as influential on the electronic music scene as French duo's Daft Punk. Consisting of Thomas Bangalter and Guy Manuel de Hamam Cristo, Daft Punk embraced anonymity. The duo met at a screening of the film Phantom of the Paradise, which is one of the reasons that they performed in their helmets, catching the world's attention with their earworm Around the World, and also their song Defunk, which was inspired by Warren G's Regulate. And while this album may only have 2 recognizable hits on it, the album itself is fully formed and an experience more than anything else. From the warbly sound of bass thumping through the wall until you get the clarity of it in fully formed, and then just kind of the weaving of the tracks with little drops from radio stations to the sound of just walking through walls of a club, going into a different room, hearing a different party over in this end of town and going to check it out. That's what Homework feels like. It feels like being a part of a scene that Daft Punk themselves helped create. Number 6, WuTang Clan, Enter the Wu-Tang, 36 Chambers. The RZA, the Jizza, Old Dirty Bastard, Inspector Deck, Raekwon the Chef, You God, Ghostface Killer, and the METHOD Man. They formed like Voltron, using gritty, dirty, lo-fi beats combined with sound bites from old kung fu films. Wu-Tang Clan made its mark on hip-hop and music permanently. Super producer RZA took really old, dusty technology, just what he was able to afford, learned how to use it and do something unique, showing that you don't need the latest technology and you don't need all the money in the world to make a real impact on music. This is one of those albums where the imperfections make the album perfect. Each of the 9 members of the Wu-Tang Clan had their own style, which not only gave them depth as a group, but made them superstars individually later on. There's absolutely no way that you are not going to bust through brick walls after listening to Wu-Tang Clan. Definitely check out the tracks Wu-Tang Clan Ain't Nothing to F With, Cream, Method Man, Protect Your Neck, and also Can It All Be So Simple. Number 5, Liz Phair, Exile in Guyville. It was rumored that Liz Phair wrote this album as a track-by-track retort to the Rolling Stones' Exile on Main Street. And in the immortal words of Mick Jagger, the change has come. Liz Phair took indie rock under her thumb and completely flipped it on its head. She was raw, she was gritty, she talked about things that women didn't necessarily talk about in public, like on the song F***ing Run, waking up next to someone you had a one-night stand with that you don't remember and feeling just awkward, trying to get out of there without like having that weird conversation. I mean, just all the songs on there talked about things that nobody was willing to talk about yet, and she did it on her debut album and killed it. That album is still influential to this day. Number 4, the Suicide Machines, Destruction by Definition. How did the Suicide Machines get this high up on the list? The album is that good. There is no other album in the genre of ska punk that captures the energy of youth and skateboarding and politics and the just desperateness that is with love, just everything going on that is so amplified when you're a teenager. It's on record in Destruction by Definition. I remember going to see this band play Warped Tour, and Jay Navarro fired security in front of everybody because they were mishandling the crowd surfers, brought fans up to the front of the stage and had them act as the security because the hired security was manhandling, and then they got dropped from Warped Tour. I will always respect Suicide Machines on another level from what I saw that day because of how they cared about their fans. They were kids when they made this record, and they literally went in and recorded like they were doing a show. They put all of their energy on tape and captured this lightning in a bottle that doesn't hardly ever exist when you're trying to record in a studio. Number 3, Weezer, the Blue Album. Produced by the Cars' Rick Ocasek, the first Weezer album is arguably the only one you need, maybe Pinkerton. But this is an album that is fully formed from a band that played in a garage, sang about 12-Sided Die, Dungeons & Dragons, and Kiss at a time when none of that was cool. Coming right on the tails of the grunge movement and coming up with pop-punk bands like Offspring and Green Day, Weezer built a bridge between nerddom and rock stardom that did not exist before. Kids were screaming for My Name is Jonas. The opening riff of that song all the way to the very end, 7-minute long, Only in Dreams. There is not a bad moment of music on that album. It is a debut almost as perfect, if not more so, than Boston's debut. Number 2, Pearl Jam, 10. Released before Nirvana's Nevermind, Pearl Jam's 10 took a little bit longer to catch on, but it stuck around a lot longer. It was a debut album from band members who had previously been in other projects such as Mother Love Bone, Green River, and the short-lived Temple of the Dog tribute band. They excelled with their album 10, which was a tribute to the band's original name, Mookie Blaylock, a basketball player who wore the number 10 on his jersey. When the band hooked up with Eddie Vedder, a surfer from California, he brought his trauma and his pain to the forefront. However, it was also something he wanted to escape while in the public eye, so he never released a lot of singles or music videos, even though they had to make them for Jeremy and Alive. Even Flow was a video that they recorded live on stage. When pressed to make a video for the song Black, Vedder refused. One of the things you would see on MTV all the time was their unplugged performance, where Eddie Vedder would stand on a chair for the instrumental breakdown of Porch, writing pro-choice on his arm. He would climb scaffolding, he would dive into the crowd. He was just full of energy, wine probably, and God may care attitude. And that was one of the things that separated them from the pack of their Seattle cohorts, was that Pearl Jam was the accessible grunge band. Over the past 30 years, since the release of their debut, Pearl Jam has never stopped putting out albums, being relevant, or shocking fans with different set lists every night. Number 1, Rage Against the Machine. Even the cover was affronting on this album. With a monk on fire, you knew what you were getting into when you listened to the debut album from Rage Against the Machine. Lead singer Zach De La Rocha originally was in a hardcore band called Inside Out, where they had a song called Rage Against the Machine. But when he teamed up with Tom Morello, Brad Wilk, and Tim Cumberford, it was a whole new beast entirely. These instrumentalists were so funky, so inventive. You had a rhythm section that just made you want to dance while having a guitarist who was playing his guitar like he was the DJ for a hip-hop group. Tom Morello is clearly the most inventive guitarist since Jimi Hendrix. He's doing things with the instrument that had never been done before and will never be done again because he built guitars to do specifically that noise. The band even felt so compelled to explain to people in the liner notes that guitar, bass, and drums are the only instruments on this record, because they knew people would not be able to grasp how incredible this music was if they didn't at least flesh out, hey, we're doing this organically. One of the great things about the education that the members of Rage Against the Machine brought to their lyrics, they were not only educating you about things that are going on in the world, in other countries that you may not be hearing about on the news, or in jail cells like Mumia Abu-Jamal, and they're telling you these stories from the side of the oppressed. They're telling you history from the loser's side, which is a side you never hear history from. You always only hear it from the side of the winners, because what do they say? History is written by the winners. This is the underdogs band. This is the leftist revolutionary Che Guevara t-shirt wearing outsiders. And they're telling you like it is from the perspective of the people who are getting bombed, from the people who are losing consistently to power. Take the power back. They are Public Enemy as a rock group. They've been about 30 years ahead of their time the entire time, because they've been talking about issues that are just now coming to light in the mainstream consciousness. There are people going back during the Trump presidency and pointing to Rage Against the Machine music videos and going, wait, they were telling us that back then. The music was so good. It was so catchy. It made you want to dance, to mosh, to have a good time, to sing along, to scream, to have this rage against the machine. But who is the machine? If you didn't know, it seemed so vague, but yet it was so in your face that you couldn't miss it. But so many did. So hopefully you will go back after listening through this list, take a fine-tooth comb, take a magnifying glass, get some references, and see what Rage Against the Machine is talking about then and now.